Youth-led organisations play a significant part in the Australian youth sector. Since the 1960s, youth participation has been consistently increasing its role in society. From student representative councils to youth advisory committees, Youth Climate Coalition to social pioneers, young unionists to Indigenous and refugee youth organisations. It is all happening here in Australia.
So YOUTH exists mainly to do, I would say, three things. One is to represent our members and the sector more broadly in terms of advocating for better conditions for young people and the sector who work to support them. So that might be anything from making sure that young people's views are heard in government policy, or making sure that there's better or good quality youth work happening out there. It can be a range of things. It can be a range of policy issues or a range of topics. So there's that sort of advocacy around young people and the sector that supports them. Then there's a level of research and policy writing that we do, which is more around thinking about the issues and developing up responses to things if government have identified an issue that they want some response on, or identifying a need from the sector and researching and writing on that. And then obviously the third really important element of our work is ensuring that youth and young people's voices are heard throughout not just the sector but more broadly the society in general. And so that's around promoting instances of good practice around youth participation and hoping that we model that through our own youth participation practices within the organisation, but really just trying to remind people of the benefits that can be had by involving young people in processes.
I would say the one of the biggest problems facing the youth sector in Australia at the moment is around the concept of youth participation being framed very much around an economic agenda. I think that's a challenge to youth workers and to people who are engaging with young people, but we've been asked to increasingly operate in an environment where participation is equaling either getting a job or being involved in some kind of employment or training. And I think that is a very limiting definition of participation, and it can preclude or exclude a lot of the other great work that goes on within the youth sector. So I think that's a definite tension that we need to be aware of and work to challenge. Youth participation is very much about working with young people, not doing things for them. And the idea that young people have a lot to offer in the future is admirable, but we're trying to communicate the message that young people have a great deal to offer now. And in fact, the notion of youth participation is slightly almost a false distinction, because young people are part of society, part of community, just as much as people over the age of 25 are. So really what we are, I think, within YAPIC doing is advocating just for participation of everyone.
From my perspective, there's a couple of other challenges around youth participation. One is that nobody that I can see, or very few organisations that I can see, are doing it well in terms of engaging the more difficult to engage young people. It's generally done well to engage the ones that want to be engaged and work with the young people who want to be worked with and engaged and come into your organisation and get active. And then when you have a group like that who are articulate and intelligent and onto it, how do you bring kids in who are probably struggling a little bit more, or not so confident, or don't have the same sets of skills or abilities in different ways because of life circumstances or whatever? How do you is it appropriate to bring those two sorts of groups together? Should you work with one group separately? Should we always be aiming to engage the disengaged? Do they want to be engaged in that way? All of those sorts of things. So those are bigger, broader questions that I think we need to be tackling. And I hope that that's the next sort of step in the youth participation discourse around, I call them the bright and shinies, and I don't mean any disrespect to young people who are really bright and really confident and really articulate, but I have to be honest about most of the young people that we work with here would fall into that category. So our challenge as an organisation, and I'm very honest about it, and I think most organisations that work with young people in a genuine youth participation model face the same challenges. What do we do to ensure a more diverse range of young people are engaged within our organisation? I don't have the answers to that. I want to have more discussions about that. I guess the other point that I think we need to challenge or tackle in some ways is this sort of what I see decision makers doing a lot with young people and that they want to engage with or have a youth participation model with, is the sort of patronising. Gee, they're so bright, those kids. God, that sort of almost they don't even realise that they think they're being supportive when they sort of exclaim with astonishment or shock just how great these kids are. So I think we need to sort of tackle that. And I've seen it so many times when we get together a group of young people for a government consultation, and not just government, but any kind of formal consultation, and afterwards the facilitator or the people from that agency will go, God, just amazed at how they knew stuff. It's just like, yeah, like these are people who want to be talked to on a serious level about things that they believe in. Why are you surprised? It's like going back to that thing that we all have a right to participate.
One of the big pieces of work that we're currently doing is looking at how we can work with decision makers, whether that's local government decision makers or those people who are in decision making positions in organisations like sports clubs or leisure centres, working with those people to help them to understand what youth participation really is and what benefits there are for their organisation, for themselves, for their colleagues, for their electorate, and really helping them to understand that youth participation is not a box-ticking exercise. It's not something that can be done perhaps very quickly and easily and shoved out of the way. It's an ongoing process.
All those things are continuing battles, and even going back historically, I remember, for example, Andy Ingham, once when he was working in Brunswick, saying that he would oppose setting up a youth council in Brunswick because he saw that as being a group of young guys who saw that as a political training ground for them to become the next mayor, and therefore. Well, whatever. But it was not seeing something about the broad range of young people and access and participation, but it was seen in a very narrow agenda, and therefore let's not do it. And I think the same thing has happened with SRCs, the Student Representative Councils in schools, that we've been very critical of their historical role of being excluding some young people and excluding some areas of work. But that doesn't mean that we've ditched those, rather that we have taken that on head on and seen that as ways that we can actually improve and change that agenda. And so at the moment, the exciting things to me that are happening are a thing called Teach the Teacher, which is a possibility for students leading professional development discussions with teachers in schools and getting that on the agenda. And that's all being run by students within schools, and that's exciting work. But the other thing I wonder about, and this is like whether it's Estonia or whether it's Australia, whether it's the States, whether in fact now that whole idea of youth work and empowerment and so on, maybe we're all irrelevant. The new social media, the Occupy movements, has it all bypassed us, and we're now redundant oldies pretending that we've still got a role in where young people's lives are going.
Yes, perhaps, but I also think they're tools. Just like any other tool that we might have used in the past, or young people might have used in the past, it's another tool. It's not an end in itself.
Well, I wonder if youth workers were active in the Arab Spring in Tunisia. Were there youth workers in Tunisia?
They were up the back giving them breakfast so that they could get through the day.
To remember as the adults or the non-young people or whatever who are setting up these structures for young people to engage in, they don't talk about it in terms of youth participation or youth engagement. They don't walk out the door in the morning and go, bye mum, I'm off to youth participate. They just see that they are involved in an organisation that genuinely wants their involvement.